Hey guys, welcome back to the Dice Matrix, where a lot of times we talk about board games, but recently now I'm talking about comics. This is die number 2, and if you didn't catch my first video on the die number 1, go back and watch that. So there are spoilers ahead, so let's talk about this. Alright, so here we are in the second comic book, episode 2 of Die. I believe it's called Players on the Inside. And actually, interesting note about the cover. I never realized that. I was trying to figure out why do a lot of the covers have this weird framing on it, and I was trying to figure that out. Then when you turn to the opening pages, it actually shows you if you unfolded each one of the dice, they would have all these faces, and basically there's 20 triangles here, as if you were unfolding a 20-sided die. Also, you find out in this episode that the world is called Die, and I'm going to throw up a picture here. One of my, it's not my favorite shot. Well, it might be. This might be my favorite. You know what? Let's just go ahead and call it. I always do something called my favorite frame, and this is pretty much my favorite frame in the whole thing, where Angela, the Neo character, which is basically like a rogue or a thief, she pulls up this image using her cyberpunk technology, and you see the world as it is shaped like a 20-sided die. And each area that they're in is like, well, it's probably numbered, I believe, and they might have names as well. But it's funny because it's like, oh, I never really thought about it that way. So if they mentioned that in the first one, my brain didn't catch up on it. But I thought, what a brilliant idea that the world is actually like a D20. It's a magical world. It's a science fiction world. You can do whatever you want with it. Okay, so immediately they get back, and we find out that Solomon's there, and they basically feel like he's almost like a robot NPC just giving him information that may not even be the real him, because he's way off in the opposite part of the world at the D20 zone. And he said, we can play here forever. I took care of the Grand Master. Well, what happened to the other guy? Well, the nice thing is, right off the bat, they explain what happened. Solomon tells these guys they had, that they figured out how to beat the Grand Master by, if the Grand Master is defeated and they all get to agree together, then they can return home. Basically like, the girl slapping her ruby slippers together in Wizard of Oz. But what happens is, as they defeat the Grand Master, apparently he wasn't dead, but it met the rules for them to be able to return. They all got together, agreed, and they're about to be summoned home. And then the Grand Master gets up and grabs Solomon and pulls him back, And so Solomon starts to tell the story of how all these years, a couple of decades, he's been left back here, that he finally defeated the Grand Master. It was very hard for him, but he defeated him, and now he is the Grand Master. So he's kind of making the rules of this land, and he just wants everybody to have fun, and we're going to game forever, and we all think that, okay, Solomon's a little now, but that makes an interesting story to tell, because the people, that had, he's been in that world for this long. Well, the other people was only gone 2 years, and now they're back in these characters, but it's been over 20 years, or about 20 years since they've returned, because they're all like in their early 40s now. And so now they're trying to get back into their characters of how to get to Solomon and convince him to agree to all go home and have him come home with them, instead of having this big epic quest fight or whatever. But this is, you got to have a story. If you saw that in episode 2 here, or story 2, then you wouldn't need the rest of the stories, right? So right off the bat, what I like about this is that immediately there's an encounter, and they run into these bad people things, and they have to fight them. And you get to see the characters are defined one by one. You get to see each one in action, kind of like what they do. Now, as I described, let's go ahead and start at the D20, which he's not in the battle. The D20 belongs to Solomon, and he's basically like the wizard, kind of class, where he's the game master making everything. In this, he's called the Grand Master. But, we don't know the whole limits or scopes of his powers. We're just getting into it. Now we'll go to the D4 on the opposite end, which is Dominic Ash, which is a guy, but he's a girl in this world, because that's the character he had created to play in this world. And she, let's just call her, I'll call her by the character name. So Ash, she is called the Dictator. And the interesting thing is, she's a variant of like the Bard, according to Gillen, that is almost like the speaking part. You know how bards will sing music to inspire people, to encourage people, or make magic happen just by their words and stuff. Well, this is that portion of it. And I believe Gillen in the back, not in the actual story, but he explains in the very back that basically it's like evil sorceress meets bard, if everybody was afraid of a bard. And so at the next level, the D6 is Chuck, which is the carefree. He's called the Fool. And Chuck is, the kind of like, hey, let's get things done. He's the guy that shows up to have fun at the party. And when you game with him in the group, he's the guy like, let's just do this, blah, blah, kind of a reckless haphazard. And so he's basically the other iteration of a bard, which is the swashbuckler part, the part with the rapier, walking, slashing stuff up and haha, and having a good time. And so, although some things work out for him, he just seems to always be okay for that type of character. Chuck is like the perfect, fool swashbuckler character for this story, which moves us to the D8, the D10, and the D12. And I'm trying to remember exactly which one belongs to which. I know Angela is considered like the thief. She's the cyberpunk Neo. So Angela's actually the D10, and she basically, her character, when she got back, was missing an arm. Well, in this world, she has the cyberpunk metal arm and the big face shield, and she's really, really awesome. But the interesting thing about her character is she can't use her gifts. Every day her arm and other abilities don't really work unless she pays a tribute with fair gold. I think it's spelled Fair in the book. And the thing about that is that I guess there's these people called like fairies, but it's spelled that way. And I guess the reward, I will find out more about it as it goes on, but she has to basically, like a tithe to them. She'll take it and it's absorbed into her, her whole being, and then all her stuff functions for the day. So every day she has to consume some of this fair gold, and then she can do all these amazing things as her character, Neo. We also have Matt, who's called the Grief Knight, and he is basically based upon your paladin archetype, where he is very powerful, especially when he's unleashed as when he's feeling emotion. And apparently you'll find out at the end of this story that there is something called a Joy Knight. And Gillen explains later in the back that there are probably 8 classes of knight, and every single one of these knights are actually driven. Their main strongest powers come through when they're driven by that main emotion. So there's a part where they really needed Matt to get into it, and he's like, no, I can't feel, I'm not feeling the grief of our situation. And so Ash, being the dictator, just starts speaking like, you feel this way, you feel the upsetness and the tragedy and all this. And he's like, no, don't do it. And of course immediately he just becomes sad and grief stricken, and then his power, and he just kind of lights up, and he gets in there with his big sword and just starts taking care of his business. Which brings us to the D12. Matt was the D8, by the way. And the D12 is, I believe her name's Isabella. And she is considered, I guess, a really odd spinoff or riff of the cleric class, which is a cleric actually gets their abilities from a divine being, and then they're imbued with that power to cast spells or healing or whatnot. Well, when she made her character, whether she was trying to be funny or she just thought it was cool as a kid in 1991, she said, well, I'm going to be an atheist, that I get to basically have my power over gods or something, right? So it's like, I don't believe in you, but I control you. And so she's called the Godbinder, and her ability is really interesting. She basically calls upon this huge, massive entity from another, I guess, realm or something. It looks like a big spirit bear that's the size of like 3-story building or something. And it's almost like she's making a deal like, you owe me this. And so it comes out and it's like, that's great. And so you have all these things. But the best part is you get to see everybody functioning in their role. So we all have an idea now of what these characters kind of represent. And we don't know the whole scope of it or how they'll eventually interconnect, but we get to see what they do and how they're doing it. Which was the biggest payoff in this. And I think that might have been the main point. So everybody is familiar, not only with, we're ready to go in the story, and not to set up anything for a little spoiler at the end of this, but you see by the end of the story, they run into another character that has been left there all this time since they had returned. And now they're having to deal with some of the consequences of things they had put in motion, which is a very interesting concept, because this world just kept going as this fantasy world. Solomon was here and he had to deal with the Grand Master. I have no idea how long it took him to defeat the Grand Master, and now he's the Grand Master, but that may pay into it. I mean, there could be hundreds of side stories or even flashbacks on Earth. I mean, I don't know what they're going to do with the story. I mean, if they just stay even in this land, I would be content, because I'm a big fan of the fantasy universe and all RPG games. But I definitely respect the work that's been written in here, and the art that's helps flesh out the story even more. It's just been a fantastic ride. Issue number 2 is very good. So I definitely have to give it a rating of 9.0. So 9 out of 10. The first issue was a 9.5. And I don't see this dipping down too much. But I thank all of you for listening to me and talking about the issue. If you're excited, write down below. Tell me what you want to see, what you think about, where I'm stupid about my ideas. Just tell me what's going on. All right, guys, have a great day. Happy comic reading, happy role playing, and until the next time, keep the dice rolling.